Hey, it's Mike with the Logan and the Hobo RV Adventure channel. Welcome back to the channel. Logan is my truck, the Hobo is my trailer. They are best friends forever.
Logan and the Hobo, best friends forever.
Today I want to talk about servicing your wheel bearings on your trailer, and so let's just get right into it. Now, my trailer has Lippert axles, and I believe it also has Lippert hub assemblies. The manual, the Keystone manual, says that they should be serviced every 1 year or 10,000 miles. Now, I'm not driving 10,000 miles in a year, so at the most, I'm going to service my wheel bearings every 1 year. I'm going to be honest, I don't service them every year. I service mine, it's been about every 2 years. Per the manual, these hubs come with auto grease port, auto grease Zert, and so they're really easy to grease. You'll talk to some guys and they'll say that you shouldn't do that, and I'll get more into that in a little while. The first time I re-greased the wheel bearings, I took everything apart, cleaned it, took the bearings apart, replaced the seals, greased everything, replaced the seals, put it back together. That's how I did it. It was good, I think, for the first time to make sure everything was done correctly from the factory, to have make sure for my peace of mind, to make sure that the wheel bearings were assembled correctly and they were greased well. And so there was no problems with that. It's been about 2 years since I did that. I didn't want to go through that whole process again, and so I used the auto grease port on the hub, and I greased the bearings that way. Guys and gals that you'll talk to that say don't use the auto grease port. The auto grease port, you just hook the grease gun into the grease zerk right there on the front of the hub. You don't have to take everything apart, and you pump grease in, and in the middle of the hub, it's hollow or whatever, and then it's got openings on the backside, and so as you're pushing grease in, that grease is coming out of the backside, and it's filling the hub with grease and pushing the old grease out. Is how that works. And so that's how I did it this time. It worked fine. The argument against that is that you could blow out the rear seal on the hub, and you could be pumping grease directly into your brakes. So that's a concern, definitely something to keep mindful of. I'm not worried about it, number one, because the manual specifically says to use the auto grease port, the auto grease zerk. And number two, you're pumping the grease in. If the grease is coming back towards you, that means that it's not busting through the seal and pumping into the brakes. If it's coming towards you, that means it's coming towards you. And so I'm not super worried about it. You can tell as you're pumping the grease in there that the grease is not, it doesn't feel like it's going through the back seal, and just, it feels like everything you're pumping in there is coming back towards you. I will say, however, when you start pumping, it does take a little while as you start pumping grease in there for the grease to start pumping through. So it's a good 30-40 seconds before you actually start to see the grease coming towards you. And so just be aware of that you may be a little bit worried at the beginning that you are blowing out the rear seal, but I don't think that you are. Especially if you're using a hand pump grease gun. If you're using a hand pump grease gun, I think it's highly unlikely that you're going to be able to blow out the rear seal. I think it's a lot more likely, and you shouldn't use any kind of pneumatic grease gun or battery powered grease gun or anything to pump the grease in, because that could blow out the rear seal. So on my wheels, there's just a little metal cap that you can pop off with a screwdriver here, and then there's a little rubber seal that seals the actual inner part of the hub where the grease port is. That just pops off. I use the screwdriver to pop that off as well. And inside there you can see where I'm pointing to, that's the grease zerk. This is sped up quite a bit because I didn't want you to be bored just watching me pump grease in here, but you can see that it takes a while for the grease to start coming back towards me. And so here in a minute, you'll see it start to come back towards me, and then when it gets to be enough, I just wipe it away with a paper towel, and I continue on like that until I don't see any dirty grease coming out. I just see the fresh grease coming out. grease I used, well, the first time I did it, I just went to the local RV dealer, actually the place where I bought the RV from, and I went to their parts department and I just asked what they use in their service department when they repack the wheel bearings, and I got the same grease that they use. I actually bought it from them, and it was Chevron Dello high temperature grease. So that's what I use this time, except I got a little bit different. This is like the heavy duty high temperature grease, and I think anything rated for high temperature, extreme pressure to be used in wheel bearings is going to be adequate. One thing I will mention with a grease is you want to use, you don't want to mix greases. So this time, both times I've done the wheel bearings is I use the Chevron grease, but like I said, this time it was a little bit different type of Chevron grease. And so I made sure that you can see the grease coming out as you're pumping grease in, and you can see the color change. And so the old grease is kind of dirty and it was a different color. So when all that got pushed out and I started seeing the new color come through, and just the new color, then I knew I'd replaced pretty much all the old grease with the new grease. Same thing if you're repacking the wheel bearings, if you're taking everything apart, obviously you're going to get it all clean and they use brand new grease, but you don't want to mix greases. So if you do change the type of grease, make sure you get it all the old stuff out of there before you put the new stuff in. I'm not an RV mechanic, I'm not an expert, I'm not a mechanic, certified mechanic of any time. I just like working on of any type. I just like working on my own stuff. And so take everything that I'm telling you with a grain of salt. I'm just showing you what I do. I encourage you to do your own research if you're going to tackle this project on your own and figure out what the best thing is for you to do. And if you're not comfortable, if you're not confident in anything, I would say hire a professional. And so don't just take my word for it. Like I said, I'm not an expert. But I have repacked the wheel bearings before and they were completely fine, no issues there, and so I feel confident that what I'm doing is working. It took me about 15 minutes per wheel. That's not including setup or cleanup time. 15 minutes per wheel to just pump the grease in, so it was pretty easy. If I remember correctly, when I actually took the wheels off and took the whole hub apart and the wheel bearings apart, it was probably more like 45 minutes to an hour per wheel. So it's quite a bit of time savings if you use the auto grease port, if you use the auto greaser, auto lubrication hubs on these things. And I think most newer trailers have that feature, the auto grease hub, and so it makes it quite a bit easier, quite a bit faster, a lot less mess. So I was happy with it, and I should be good to go for another couple years. I think the next time that I do the wheel bearings, I will take them all apart, make sure everything still looks good in there, and that's my plan. Is every 2 years I'll just rotate using the auto lube axle, and then vice versa, just taking the whole thing apart, cleaning it, repacking the wheel bearing. Anyway, that wraps it up for another episode of the Logan and the Hobo RV Adventure Channel show. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did like it, please give me the thumbs up. If you enjoy the content, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.